On this episode of the Star Trek Universe podcast, Matt and I are both sick, but we're still going to plow ahead and cover all good things in our Picard primer. Right after this.
Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
What's up, buddy?
Oh, just sick and sniffling and the whole thing.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I am also sick, but you know what I'm not sick of?
Star Trek. This
episode is quite good. Let's dive right into it. Did you have a synopsis, or should I rattle one off?
I've got the one from Memory Alpha. Picard learns from Q that he is to be the cause of the annihilation of humanity and begins an incredible journey through time from the present to the past when he first took command of the Enterprise to 25 years into the future. That's it. Very
cool. Well, again, this is the last episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, all good things. And, man, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I think it's just a really amazing way to encapsulate the series by showing earlier than we ever saw, or like literally right before we ever saw, and then showing 25 years later, and then also having it sort of wrap up in the current timeline, and having Picard finally have a little personal growth. I cannot say enough good things about this episode, but let me say one negative thing about TNG in general, which is, I've said it before, I don't think they have enough character development of the characters on the show. After this show ended, it auto-played the Star Trek The Next Generation retrospective. Have you watched that?
Are you talking about Journey's End?
I don't know if it's Journey's End. It's just called the retrospective on on Netflix.
Well, because I know they did in between or right before the final episode, they had
it is called Journey's
documentary.
End. Yeah, it's called Journey's
Jonathan
End.
Frakes hosted called Journey's End.
Well, I was just watching that, and I'm 8 minutes into it, and they have an interview with Rick Berman, and he's talking about how far the characters have come. And it's so sad. He's trying to tell us how far the characters have come. Like that's the thesis sentence of his statement. And then he goes on to talk about each character and cannot come up with one legitimate thing that changed. It's so bad. I mean, he says things, but like they aren't changes. They definitely aren't changes. I don't know. It's just real bad.
I do think they did change over the course of the series, but they weren't certainly not like today's characters, in
anything. Yeah.
What's even more sad is I saw an interview that Rick Berman did, a 3-hour interview, and just a few years ago, and Rick Berman couldn't remember the names of the characters.
Wow, that's pretty atrocious. That's a man who cares about his work. It's a man who really knows the bricks that he laid into this wall that we call Star Trek. Anyway, I don't want to harp on that, but I just thought that was really funny. It's like, it's just where I was when we started our Skype conversation. I was watching that, and it's just so funny. He's like, it's very different. Picard, they changed so much over 7 years. Picard starts out as a confident leader who really knows his place and in this world, and then the end here, he's the same. I was like, that's not a difference.
I would say Picard's arc here is he's found family that he didn't expect. He was very wary of family.
Well, he came to terms with his desire for family too, and continues to do that. That's a big part of his arc for sure. I agree, but that mostly happens in this last episode. Like, I feel like they gave him a little bit of an arc, like something to achieve in this last episode, which was his, like, obviously sitting down at the poker table. Like, that's his entire arc for this show. is him finally deciding to join them for the poker game, which is nice. It's a nice way to end the series with the one piece of character development on the show. I'm exaggerating, obviously. There's some character development here and there, but most of the changes that Berman mentions, he's like, at the beginning, Data was very robotic, and over time, he whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's not really true. He was kind of less robotic at times in the beginning and more at other times, and yeah, it's just kind of. I feel like most of the actual changes in the characters are more like almost production changes, where the people who playing them kind of figured them out, or the people who writing them kind of figured them out. More so than intentional development. But anyway, let's not harp on that, because this episode, for all of TNG's failings, which, I love TNG, I really do. But this episode is one of the shining moments of TNG. I love it.
Yeah. I agree.
You know about the Endgame connection to this episode, right? Avengers Endgame.
Oh, I mean, if I sat around, navel gazing for long enough, I could probably come up with it. What's the connection?
It's really interesting. When Kevin Feige was being interviewed about what they were going to do with Avengers Endgame.
Oh yeah,
he said he drew a lot of inspiration from the way they ended The Next Generation from this episode, and I think that is so cool. And when you're rewatching it now, you really can see. The jumping around in time, obviously. Spoiler alert for Avengers Endgame, I guess. But they do the same thing. They pick different time periods in that canon, and they jump around and show you different things. They even jump forward in time a little bit, even though it's not a time travel mechanic. They jump forward in time to show you what would have happened to these characters if they'd lived 5 more years. Right. And it's just neat that he said that in an interview, and that it's so correlated. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think I remember Marcus and McFeely saying they drew inspiration from this, now that you mention it. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, really neat. Two universes I love a lot. So,
well, it's a fantastic finale. It really is.
It's textbook. I mean, and I think that's why Marcus and McFeely and Feige looked at this. It's because what shows have ended well? There's very few. Even a lot of my favorite shows end poorly.
Yeah,
and this is one that stuck the landing, in a way that most don't. And so I really am. It makes sense that they would pull from this and go, what did they do, and how can we use that?
It always bugs me whenever I see a finale that tries to do a clip show.
Oh yeah,
and they're like, oh, let's look back up on the time of the blue. And Seinfeld did that. Boy Meets World did that. There's a bunch of them that did it, and it's really annoying.
Wait, Seinfeld wasn't a clip show, though, right? It was not an actual clip show. Do you just mean revisiting previous characters and moments?
Which one did you say?
Seinfeld didn't end with a clip show.
Oh,
right?
It did. Totally did. Like, there was a story, but they just kept going back to showing because they're in that court scene, and every character they've wronged or whatever is shown up, and every time one of them gets up there to tell their story, it cuts back and shows the clip.
Oh, I legitimately did not remember there were actual clips. I remembered that it was all the people they'd wronged over the years in a courtroom, which is a pretty fun way to end that show. Honestly, I liked it.
I have grown to like it over the years, but it sucked at the time, especially with the fact that they showed a freaking clip show before the finale.
Yikes.
That was nothing but a clip show. So anyway, I think in terms of series finales, you either go all good things or you go goodbye, farewell, and amen from MASH.
Which I've never seen. I've never seen all of MASH, so.
Ooh. Man.
I know you love it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Check that out.
There are very few that stick the landing, especially for these sorts of sort of big, expansive universes like Star Trek, where you've got so much going on. It's hard to end well, Mm-hmm. And really cool that they did it so well. So I feel like the main thing to pull from this is where the characters end up in the end. Talk about the growth, the actual growth that the characters do have in the 25 years off screen. It's like they spent 7 years not letting the characters change much because they wanted the show to be plug and play and watch at any moment. And then they suddenly, but the next 25 years, those would have been really interesting.
I have to admit, even as a kid, I was like, so this whole time I've been waiting for Picard and Crusher to get together, and they wait until after the show to get together.
Yeah, they do it off screen, and then
then get divorced.
Yeah, we first find out they were married, and they're already divorced.
It's such a bummer.
It really is. It really is. Also, there are definitely some weird inconsistencies in this episode, like Warp 13. We know from later Star Trek that Warp 10 is infinite speed, supposedly. So that's an issue. But I headcanon it with it, like they just have a different kind of warp in the future, and they just use the same sort of rating system, even though they use different warp or whatever.
Yeah, it's the same headcanon we have to use because of the transwarp use in Star Trek 3.
Right. Yeah. It's a different transwarp.
Yeah. It's a different classification. Yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. I'm fine with that. They could just be calling it 13 when really it's some other kind of technology that's also the Enterprise. Obviously this future is not the future that ends up happening. This future is a possible future.
Right.
And he makes the change because the Enterprise D does not last 25 more years.
That's right.
But I did like that Riker got his hands on the Enterprise in this episode. That was cool. Mm-hmm. Although it was one thing when it's the flagship to be like, I want to be the man in the chair on the flagship, you know? Mm-hmm. It's kind of another thing when you're just like still on the Enterprise after 32 years and you won't let them decommission it because you're just like have a fetish for that ship. You know? It's kind of sad. It's kind of a sad thing ending for Riker.
It's his home, man. That's been Riker's whole bit. Is he was a career. His arc follows Picard's arc in a lot of ways. Like he was a man who didn't have a family. He had issues with his family. The small amount of family that he actually had, but he was a career man. And then he found the Enterprise, and he found a home, and he found a family, and he didn't want to give that up. Like his career took a back seat to that. Like Picard gave up the Admiralty once or twice at least in the series.
Yeah, to stay on the ship.
Riker gave up the captain's chair to stay on the ship.
It's supposed to give us an affection for them that they're doing what they love, which is cool. But I still feel like sometimes like they're wasting their potential / not doing the things they need to do for themselves or for the Federation. You know, seems weird.
But it's Star Trek. Their goal isn't career advancement. Their good Lord, their goal is personal fulfillment, like,
right? And exploration, and to see new worlds, and
yeah, that's another thing. That's another good point that you have to consider. Like these guys have been on several different ships leading up to the Enterprise. Are you telling me that all of those ships had interesting life and death consequences missions every week?
Yeah, they're just no, that's the thing. It's the flagship, and it's out on the edge of exploring space. And
on the raggedy edge.
On the raggedy edge, man. Don't push me. Yeah. Okay, so that's Riker. We kind of talked about Riker. Troy's dead. So that's where she is. Yep. Actually, I found that very emotionally satisfying to see the two of them at odds, and like, you know, it's exactly the kind of thing I wish this show had done more of. Kill Troy. No, I mean have tension between two of the characters in this way that like neither of them is wrong, but it's an emotionally complex situation, you know. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that with him and Worf and Troy, like the sort of love triangle that develops as the future goes on, and then she passes away, and that leaves this rift, and that's a really cool thing to do. I felt like the Data stuff was was fine. Like it was neat. It was neat to see him teaching with emotions and have a. I almost felt like they were like setting him up with his own little sitcom where he like sits and has this like sarcastic maid. I don't know. It was funny. That was enjoyable.
It annoyed me that not that part of it, but the Data is like one of the big sticking points of this episode for me.
In what way?
And it's a little gripe, and I'm just annoyed because they imply that he doesn't age.
Oh, right. And they in another episode they have said he does.
I mean, it was like just a few episodes before this one.
Right. I thought the idea was that he can age.
He does age.
Okay.
Period. He does age. He has an aging chip.
Well, I'm assuming if he has an aging chip, it can probably be programmed to age in any way he chooses.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe. But
I mean, we know from like First Contact, he can like turn his emotion chip off when he wants to. So I'm assuming he can do similar things with other chips.
I guess he decides to stop aging, but puts the streak in his hair to add distinction. I don't know. It's stupid. It's stupid.
Yeah, it didn't bother me. I think it's kind of cute.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the problem. I agree. Right there. It's not it's a little cute, but honestly, all of this ending, with the exception of the, I don't know. I guess you're right. I guess it's the most cutesy thing they do in this episode.
It's like in a previous episode, they came up with a viable solution for why the character is aging, because it's not like we haven't noticed that he's been aging the last 7 years. They even work it into the plot of an episode. Subsequently, they completely just act like that is not even a thing that happened.
Yeah.
Just for jokes, for stupid little jokes. And,
right.
I love stupid little jokes, but not when it comes at the expense of actual canon and established lore.
Right. You can have other stupid little jokes.
Yeah. I'm fine with other stupid little jokes, yeah.
It could even be really the same stupid little jokes, just him a little older.
I'm not a tonal gatekeeper.
Yeah. I've realized it about myself, and I still haven't decided if it's a failing of mine or if it's something that I am just hardwired to do. So I need to just embrace it about myself. And I love canons to make sense. That goes for real life as well. Like if I'm looking at a belief system or a philosophy, like it needs to make internal consistency for me to like buy in, Right.
It's inevitable that we're going to get canon breaks like that.
Right.
But it's just always aggravating. And if I notice it, I'm going to mention it.
Yeah.
Because
it's how we're hardwired.
Yeah, if you're, a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's just a TV show or it's just a movie or whatever," and that's fine if you can sit down and ignore things you've seen previously, and it doesn't bother you. Well, that's good for you, I guess. But for me, I'm like, you're telling me a story. If you contradict yourself, I feel like you're lying to me, and it takes me out. Mm-hmm. Or I feel like you just don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what other characters we mentioned Beverly. It was neat that they got married. I love to see her as Captain, Captain Crusher, or actually Captain Picard.
Yeah,
which was neat.
I part of me does like the idea that they were telling the fans, "We know you've been wanting this, but here's why it doesn't work."
Right.
Even they thought it would work for a second, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
And if you look at it over the course of the show, they've demonstrated time and again they might be attracted to one another and care about one another. But Beverly often disagrees with Picard.
Oh, yeah.
Often thinks he's a dick.
We've talked about the lack of conflict on the Enterprise, but it doesn't really. That is not true of them having differences of opinion, and they are often two of the more vocally, differently opinionated. Differently appended. He's got 3 arms.
She has 1 arm and a hook.
All right. Let's. Any other characters that we haven't gotten into?
I think it's interesting that I don't know. I sort of feel like it's interesting. Like I feel like they're sort of playing up this like notion of Worf and Troy for just a second, just to give Worf something to do. And poor Troy didn't get anything to do except die.
Right.
But like there was only like one episode before this that actually dealt with Worf and Troy kind of being into each other, and it was like a dream or something.
Oh, really? Yeah. I didn't really. I remembered that was a thing at the end of the series, but I don't really remember how much. And I haven't rewatched this entire season.
I think it was one episode where Worf was like, "Oh, that could be a thing," because he thought it was a thing, and then it was like a dream or something.
Yeah,
it is a union that I find that most fans are not happy with.
It was kind of weird and unnecessary. But I like what it did for the final episode. I really do. Mm-hmm. It gave that tension to Worf and Riker. But that's kind of an example of fridging, for sure. Making the two other male characters more interesting by letting her die.
Yeah, I mean, they totally fridged her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, fridged hard. But anyway. Let's see. I guess we're pretty much to the end of this episode. What do we think we learned? Anything about Picard's character that is going to be important to the Picard series?
Well, I expect that. I expect some mention of the Irumodic syndrome.
Yeah, I would hope so. I wonder if with 30 years notice or whatever. He was able to take care of at least the symptoms or whatever.
Yeah, and it looks like he does wind up back at the vineyard, which is interesting. Yeah,
it is really interesting.
When you go back and look at Family, he mentioned that he didn't want to leave, or he wasn't necessarily disinterested in the vineyard. Right.
Yeah, it's just it wasn't his home. His home's among the stars, but then we talked a lot about it when we watched Family. But yeah, he goes to the vineyard to find himself after a tragedy, and it sounds like something is going to happen that kicks off Picard that is so tragic that he goes home, and there is no family there to sort of remind him who he is, and as we know from Generations, so we'll see. We'll see how that all shakes out. And it sounds like he's been there a while, is the impression I got based on the descriptions of the synopsises of whatever.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happened. We know something really bad happened, and as we know with Picard, when something really bad happens, he goes back home.
Yeah. So that's definitely interesting. I wonder how much, if we see these other characters, I wonder if Geordi will have a similar job. He was working at the Daystrom Institute, is that right?
I believe so.
Or back, he's working somewhere building ships, basically.
Yeah, and he was married to Leah Brahm.
Leah Brahm. See, who is that?
She was the woman who basically designed the Enterprise. Remember, he fell in love with her in the holodeck, and
no.
Then later on, actually met her.
I don't remember that. That's cool. I knew that they mentioned Leah being his wife, but I didn't remember that she was in the show otherwise. That's cool.
Yeah, that was some deep canon, man.
Neat. Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see more and see how much they tie in from this.
Yeah. My favorite thing in this episode was Q.
Yeah, Q is great in this episode. Q is really wonderful in this episode.
I love the idea of picking up where the pilot left off and being like, the trial never ended. We've been watching you the whole time.
And we see in another great piece of development. We see Q's development in that he actually is actively helping them in this episode. He's not the cause. He is allowing Picard to shift through time so that he can figure it out. He's giving him a fighting chance, which was interesting. It's almost as if he's been doing this trial all these years to see if this little species is worth saving, and now it's the trial is they've passed the trial, and now he's actually helping them, and that was kind of neat.
Absolutely. And it's part of me, it's like would have been good if we never got Q again after this.
Yeah, although he does say, I'll be watching, and if you're lucky, I'll visit you from time to time. So I'd be happy to see him again. It'd be interesting. It'd be really interesting if they bring him into Picard at some point.
All right, here are some of my favorite quotes from the episode. I love the bit where, like, Troy is talking about, like, dude, we were strolling barefoot along the beach, blah, 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 ocean breeze, stars in the sky, and the most you could say is stimulating. And Worf goes, it was very stimulating.
Yeah, that was really great. I like seeing Worf in love.
One of my favorite things is from the episode is when, in the future, LaForge is walking up to Picard and says, Captain Picard of the bridge, Captain, we've got a problem with the warp core, the phase inducers, or some other damn thing. Some other damn thing. Like, whenever there's a progression of things listed in a sentence, I always think, and some other damn thing, because of this episode.
Oh, yeah. I've totally heard you say that before. And it's such a great little call out to the technobabble, too. So that's pretty awesome.
I love when Data is like, Q's interest in you has always been very similar to that of a master and his beloved pet. That was only an analogy, Captain.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like Data still doesn't fully understand.
I really enjoy Picard being called an obtuse piece of flotsam by Q. And of course, the fantastic line from Q that they ran ad nauseum in the commercials for this thing back in the day when it originally aired. May whatever God you believe in have mercy on your soul.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Now this is an interesting quote, and I'm hoping that this is something that they do in Star Trek Picard. We know that we've got a second season coming. We know that they have a 3-season plan. But Q says to Picard, that is the exploration that awaits you, not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence.
Interesting, yeah. I'd like to see Picard deal with that more. I feel like the original series crew dealt with that sort of like metaphysical craziness more than the Next Generation did.
And of course, one of the best lines of the episode, I should have done this a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. That last moment.
And Troy telling Picard, you were always welcome. That was touching.
Yeah, for sure.
And it makes me wish that he had done it a long time ago.
Yeah, man.
That we'd gotten to see it.
Yeah, me too. I wish this had been a more slow progression of him, or even like getting a sense that he wanted to be there. I just wish they'd done more with that.
All right, trivia. Brandon Braga and Ronald D. Moore actually wrote All Good Things and later drafts of Star Trek Generations simultaneously, and it led them to mix the stories up. And I can see how that would be a problem here.
Yeah, and if you watch them back to back, you can see why. Like, there's a lot of similarities, at least in theme, to those two things.
I kind of wish we'd seen this. Early versions of the story included the Borg attack at Wolf 359 as a fourth main timeline, with Picard appearing as Locutus. According to Brandon Braga, Hugh would have appeared as well, and would be helping to rescue Picard from the Borg in this timeline.
Oh, man. That sounds really cool. I don't know exactly how that would work, at least with this time travel mechanic, with Hugh being there, but that's pretty rad.
Michael Piller apparently had a big... Michael Piller had a big influence on the writing of the second half of this episode. He says, the first draft of All Good Things was very similar for an hour, but the second hour wandered around without a clear story direction. That must have been when they were getting into that Generations script. He says, I wanted Ron and Brandon to get more ambitious and suggested the idea of Picard working with different versions of himself in the different time periods to solve the crisis.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things in this episode, when Picard starts to really switch between time periods very seamlessly. It just shows the like badass thought processes of Captain Picard, and like shows his command of himself and his command of any situation in a way that we don't really get to see. I don't know. That's such a challenging thing for any human being to do. It's just really cool.
This is the only season finale where Denise Crosby filmed scenes as Tasha Yar since the character had been killed prior to the end of the first season. She did appear in Shades of Grey, but it was stock footage because that was a clip show. And she was in the fourth season's finale, Redemption, as Sayla.
Yeah, that's nice. I really liked seeing her. Seeing her like really highlighted the few differences that this show has had over the course of 7 seasons, and that was nice to see her there in those first few moments of before Captain Picard knew this crew well.
So early on in the 2364 sequence, O'Brien reports that a number of ships have been reported entering the neutral zone, and there were several scenes which were ultimately deleted but are included in the episode's remastered Blu-ray release. Another reason I need to get that. That expanded upon this by having a section where Picard discovers a group of Tyrellian vessels trying to take advantage of the anomaly's healing and rejuvenation properties.
Oh, that's a cool idea. But yeah, I don't see how there's any space in this episode for that. So probably a good edit.
All right, so this was pretty great. It's said that the anomaly was formed by the convergence of the tachyon pulses from the 3 Enterprises.
Right, and there were only
But in the future, it's the Pasteur, not the Enterprise, that fires the tachyon pulse. And Ronald D. Moore later admitted, he says, this is an error that no one caught until the episode was on air. And who caught it first? Rick Berman's 10-year-old son.
Yep. I caught that immediately. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I'm very 10-year-old, but like that, I caught that immediately when they said, "Oh, with 3 Enterprises," or Data says it appears it was with the same amplitude. It appears it was all fired by the Enterprise, and I was like, "No, the Pasteur." So, I now I feel proud. I caught it. None of these producers did.
During a discussion between Chase Masterson and Brandon Braga on the website The Fandom in August of 2005, Braga stated that he thought this episode was the best Star Trek script he had ever written.
I can see that.
It's probably true.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. Probably one of the better Star Trek episodes, period, honestly.
In the 2004 commentary for the Star Trek Generations Special Edition DVD, Braga and Moore both said that they felt like all good things turned out better than Generations.
Yikes. That's such a bummer when you're given such budgets and resources and, William Shatner at your disposal playing Kirk. But, I just watched Generations and I can't throw shade. I think it's really good. And we'll talk about it next week in depth. But I think it's really great. But yeah, this episode's probably on par for the writing.
That's all I've got, man.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that's about all the time we have for this episode today. So we're going to let you go. And then we're going to ride out with another new song based on this episode, All Good Things. This is another one that came out kind of loosely based on the episode. I enjoyed writing it a lot, but it's basically based on the idea of Picard not letting anyone in to see who he is because he thinks that he needs that separation so that he can have a leadership role. And I kind of ran with that idea and how it sort of like tied into my own emotional experience. And it sort of it ended up with this weird, haunting digital instrument recording where I affected an old man voice and talked about how time was short and we should be more open with each other. And yeah, have you even heard it yet, Dave?
No, I haven't had a chance.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Listen to it right now here on the podcast. This is All Good Things. The world's a stage. All of us play our roles as we engage. With everyone we meet, yeah, we show that we're weak or push them away. But all good things, they must end. Why do we waste our time? We're only sure of today, so live every moment you find. If you saw me for who I am, would you still want my hand? How can you trust me to guide you through if you see that I'm just a man? So I'll hide my fears and I'll be just what you want to hear. But all good things, they must end. Why do we waste our time? We're only sure of today, so live every moment you find. I'm weak, I'm terrified, I'm lonely most every day, and I surely don't have the faith in me that your eyes seem to give away. And your kind words of comfort mean nothing at all. Like lies on my ears they fall. 'Cause that man that you know is just what I choose to show. But all good things, they must end. Why do we waste our time? We're only sure of today, so live every moment you find. To reach out to us, hit us up at StarTrekUcast.com, at Star Trek Ucast on Twitter, or search for the Star Trek Universe Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And if you want to hear more from David C. Robertson, search for the DC On Screen podcast in your podcast app now, or go to maladjusted.tv for his comedy sketches. If you want to hear more from me, Matthew Carroll, search for the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or the Orville Universe podcast in your podcast app, or check out my music. Just search for Matthew Carroll wherever you listen to music.